Hey guys, Francis here. How are you? Well, I'm going to borrow from somebody who's made some really interesting observations, and I'm going to do YouTube off of their content. So I want to give credit to Simon Black of Sovereign Man. So I'm going to cover a couple of points that he's raised. So, FTSE, all-time highs, the UK, the market she's running. Well, that all sounds very groovy and hunky-dory. But simultaneously, elsewhere in economy England, well, bankruptcy filings have soared 35%. Debt judgments and bankruptcy filings are 35% higher in the first quarter of this year, to the highest level in a decade. 10 years. So we were talking to Steve Keen last night about debt and the issues that they are. And despite the BBC hard talk not really taking his message that seriously, we have all-time decade highs in bankruptcies and debt judgments. All-time decade highs. So for the last 10 years under review, we've got more people folding under debt. But debt ain't an issue. But at the same time, the FTSE 100 is at all-time highs. So British consumers have clearly binged too much, and the borrowing is at record levels. And also now the defaulting they're in. So it's going bad already. That debt is going bad. All sounds a bit unsustainable, but once again, the FTSE is at all-time highs. But remember one thing, that FTSE 100 is measuring an asset, one of the rare assets and places potentially to hide in a proliferated, nation-issued, debt-encumbered fiat currency that continues to be proliferated at ever greater levels via a combination of globalized QE policies in many different countries. At some point, we've got 200 billion going out on QE at every month, not actively out of the US and the UK right now, but we've got record low rates as well. So the money that you're measuring things in is getting diminished, and everyone's trying to dash to trash. And of course, shares need to go up, but they're going up, I believe, in diminished pounds, and that's one of the key things. It hides the FTSE 100 at all-time highs that used to be a barometer of great news for national pride and national economies. Actually is almost a polarized dichotomy to the reality of the debt folding. But let's leave the sunny shores of Britain and skip across the pond. Well, what do you have over there in the land of the free? The US stock market also hit all-time highs. Wow, we must be having a global boom. All these major indices are just smashing it and going to all-time highs. But what do we find out about that? Consumer credit in the US is at an all-time high. So Steve Keen from last night saying essentially all growth is being derived from an ever-expanding proliferation of debt, which I totally concur with, appears to be justified. And all the assets that go up with this leveraged debt are all part and parcel of what is actually a major debt proliferation experiment. That started many, many decades ago, in fact. It was certainly accelerated by Mr. Greenspan, probably the person I would most like to see in The Hague for economic crimes against global humanity. But that's slightly aside. I just have a really grudge that would like to see an axe ground on him. But there's many other party players that are all part of that merry cartel of debt creation. What else have we got for you? Well, within that ever highs in the US stock market, wait for it, we need more hopium turbochargers. We've got ever higher levels of margin debt. Now, this is particularly popular in the US. This is a special little land of the free tweak for out-greeding everybody else. You have margin lending debt on a big scale there. So people will put in their $10,000, $50,000 and they're buying $200,000 worth of stock. So the margin debt levels, in other words, shares that officially have been bought in your name but you haven't actually paid for in truth, but you stand to the good on the upside of them. And unfortunately, in this beautiful world of symmetry, you stand for the bad if they were to collapse, is at an all-time high. So you have consumer credit, that's your credit cards, your purchases, your HP, your furniture loans, etc., your car loans, your motorbike loans. You can loan for anything nowadays at all-time highs, 3.8 trillion. So man in the street, 3.8 trillion. And then you have that money which is in the margin that is being borrowed to buy the shares. Think about that. Investors are borrowing record amounts of money to buy stocks at all-time highs. What could possibly go wrong? Let's say that again. People are borrowing record amounts of money to buy the shares that are already at record highs in an environment where there is a massive consumer credit bubble that is reaching all-time highs. And we've been here before. Surely this doesn't end well. Interesting in terms of the trend. If you look deeper, you'll notice that the numbers become even more bizarre. One particular equity that Simon chose to highlight, and I'm going to definitely use this example of him, and I thank him for this particular example, is the following. Coca-Cola, your favorite toxic sugary water to make you sick, ill, but first a bouncy squirrel. Well, Coca-Cola. Let's have a little look at how they've done. So if you have a look at Coke, in its 2012 earnings report, Simon tells us, 2013, you actually had the following. Coca-Cola, the share price was at $37.15. 50, my apologies. But let's look at their numbers. 2012, 48 billion in revenue for the year and 9 billion in profit. So Coca-Cola had a good year, 2012, 48 billion, 9 billion in profit. Yes? Great. That's not a bad year. If you're a shareholder, you're happy with that as a return. Surely it's roughly 10 on 50. You're getting close on 20%. Now, 2016, Coke reported 41.8. So let's just go over those numbers. Was 48, now 41.8. So that's a decline in revenue. Quite a big decline in revenue. Don't forget, they diminished dollars. Coke costs more than it does in 2012 in those diminished dollars. So its revenue's gone down, probably on an increasing price. So the number of units being sold has dropped generally, or literage or hectoliterages, however they choose to measure it. And the profit, remember, that was 9 billion. That's 9 billion on 48, is now 6.5 billion. 6.5 billion, 2.5 billion less, and on 41.8 billion in revenue. So 2016 profits that have just been reported and revenue for the 2017 first quarter year, 41.8 billion revenue, less, down from basically, let's say 6.2 billion down from the 48 billion, and profits down from 9 to 6.5. So that little drop in revenue, you've almost lost a third of your net profits. So when you compare 16 to 12, revenues declined 13% and profits declined 28%. Okay? Now, you would think with a company that's losing revenue and losing profits even faster than it's losing revenue, that the share price would be lower today than it was back then. After all, share prices are determined by the profitability of an organization. In other words, its net take out of its gross revenues. 13% drop in revenues, 28% drop. Hell, the sugar water business making poisoning everybody ain't doing as well as it used to do. Damn, all those folk ratting us out about how much damage we do, the terrible trend on sugar. Why don't they go back to consuming our toxic sugar and tartrazine? Well, I tell you why, because it's terrible for you and the secret's getting out. But never mind. What is the share price? 2012, on the higher numbers, at 48 billion with 9 billion of profit, $37.50. Today, on the substantially reduced revenue by 13% and the even hugely gutted, going on 30% reduction in profits, Coca-Cola is $43.50. The share price, $43.50. On 2016 numbers, that are 28% less profitable than so they're actually higher than what they are when they were making 28% more profit on 13% more revenue. That is, well, it's not exactly those percentages because it's actually going to be bigger when you have to go back up. Francis, you silly boy. I always make my maths mistakes. It's my dyslexia. But anyway, the point being, they're at 37.50 in 2012 and they're higher on lower revenues and lower profits, distinctly lower profits. So what do we say to this? Well, it's the margin lending. Let's have a little look further. Simon didn't stop there, and I love this little point as well. In the meantime, the long-term debt for Coca-Cola, has gone from 14.7 billion. So in 2012, they had 14.7 billion of debt on those numbers that they provided you. So you had 9 billion profits on 14.7. Basically, in a year and a half, you could have covered that debt. Now, wait for it. What do you think the debt is? What do you think? I mean, the share price is higher. Surely it's better. The debt must be substantially down. No, wrong again. The debt is almost 30 billion. That's right. They've doubled the debt. They've doubled the debt. They've lost 13% of the revenue and 28% of the profit. And this business is weighted higher than it was 4 years ago in those diminished dollars, I will add, those highly proliferated and diminished dollars. So this is Fantasyland at its very, very best. And of course, all that margin lending, buying the nifty 50 stocks at those all-time highs, will be helping this along in terms of this price. God forbid the debt ever goes away, or the banker stops playing the music and everyone stops and has to look for a chair. Oh my goodness. So this surely would not necessarily end well. There's many more examples that Simon goes on to give us, but I think you're getting the hit about this. It's just coming straight off the podcast that we did with Steve Keen. The fact that, we've been saying it for a long, long time, but I like getting really expert minds in to talk about where we're at macroeconomically, and you get it straight from Steve's mouth. This has been a debt liquidity experiment going for the better part of the last 40, 50 plus years, and unfortunately it doesn't end well, I'm afraid. And in both our views, from coming out of a bit of an outtake from last night, one of the key things I took out is that he's generally affirming my view that we deflate first. So when the problems hit, it is a flight to cash. How are you standing right now in terms of your cash holding if the music stopped? How much cash do you have? No, not in your bank account. How much cash, wink, cash that you could get to right now. And then what about your bullion holdings? Now, bullion won't do well in a deflationary environment initially, in my view, but the expectation of the medicine that will flow, and this was the other thing that Steve was quick to admit to in his opinion, and I concur, is that the medicine that will flow will be that which may well help gold and silver, and it'll be more than before, because clearly if the massive amount, 3.8 trillion consumer debt, hasn't worked, then it's just because the number wasn't big enough. And that is where we go. So make sure you understand, make sure you're planning in terms of that. I'm going to be starting my Patreon channel soon. I'm looking to get some people involved. I'm going to hope to get your support out of doing future lines like this. And we will be answering that question. And there is a remedy. And you do need to prepare. Don't be helpless. You feel straight away so much more empowered when you start taking those preparations. And I've done a number of YouTube clips about how to build a cash pile and what else to do. And I can certainly say cash will be king for a while. Do you want to be one of the distressed vulture buyers, or do you want to be Mr. Distressed, having to offload assets when everyone else is offloading leveraged assets? How severe is your HP situation, your credit situation? Do not be the likes of Coca-Cola, because they too could be losing a lot of value when the debt music stops, and stop it shall. With that, I want to love you and leave you. See the funny side. It can provoke sense of fear and trepidation with you. Do not be afraid. Life will continue. The sun will still rise, but you can save yourself a whole bunch of unnecessary stress by taking action now. Yep. Okay, Francis, saying goodbye. Hope you enjoy, and I'll keep taking the medicine, I think, the pills, whatever. But, yep, look after yourselves and think about your preparation for Reset Day.